Welcome to Political Beatdown. I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Cohen. Let's just get into it right away. Moments ago, Caroline Leavitt, Trump's chief propagandist, held a press conference, and she was asked, why is Donald Trump calling female reporters piggy and saying, be quiet, piggy, be quiet, piggy? Watch what Caroline Leavitt says, wearing a cross, Michael Cohen, wearing the cross. Here, play this clip.
Tomorrow, and I'll let the president speak for himself. Natalie.
Thank you, Caroline. What did the president mean when he called a reporter piggy?
Look, the president is very frank and honest with everyone in this room. You've all seen it yourself. You've all experienced it yourselves, and I think it's one of the many reasons that the American people reelected this president, because of his frankness. And he calls out fake news when he sees it. He gets frustrated with reporters when you lie about him, when you spread fake news about him and his administration. But he also is the most transparent president in history. And he gives all of you in this room, as you all know, unprecedented access.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, let me ask you this question. What was the question that the journalist, this female journalist on Air Force One, asked President Trump?
I believe she asked him a question about the Epstein files and the timing and what's happening and would you sign it into law? It was a question about that.
And can you tell me, please, as the legal beagle mind that you are, what is so offensive about asking when you intend to release the Epstein files, something that has basically taken over the news cycle for the last, I don't know, at least several months, six months? Why is that a disrespectful question to ask of the president, that the response should be to call this female journalist a pig?
When you are a deeply insecure, weak, pathetic shell of a man, that behavior right there is what we've seen before in Despicable Humans, and it is usually a lesson that we as mature adults try to instill in our children and instill in others not to behave that way. That this is really bad behavior, and at a very young age, to the extent we see children behaving in this way, we say, nope, you bad child, that receives punishment. And the fact that we're seeing this behavior in a grown adult in a leadership position, in the highest leader position in the presidency, is something beyond despicable. Let's just play the clip to show when Donald Trump called that reporter piggy, just so people can see it. Let's play.
Sir, is there something incriminating in the file, sir?
Even the way he said it, like, there's no good way to say quiet piggy. But like, if he were to say quiet piggy,
Ben, how is asking
the fact that
how is asking a question fake news?
The way he said it, there's in his voice, the way he even referred it to her. Like,
how about the finger pointing? The
finger pointing, quiet piggy. Like, it was a parody of a despicable, vile person, but it's real. So it wasn't parody. And you're watching it and you were like, if you were to kind of craft the script, in a Hollywood movie of that behavior, you would be like, yeah, no one's gonna believe that at all. And this is real life. This has real ramifications. And the way the reporter actually asked the question I thought the question in the White House today, what did he mean by piggy? Sometimes the best questions are simple ones. What do you mean by that? And then Caroline Leavitt's response was, he's direct and frank. What does that mean? That she's a piggy? I mean, Caroline Leavitt's response was Trump was being honest. She's a piggy. And the American people voted for him. This is what she said. Voted for him because they wanted in the Oval Office someone who refers to female reporters as
because he's, as you know, he's frank, right? He he's transparent. I mean, look at the adjectives that she's using to justify a an act which I think every single one of us here has to acknowledge is despicable behavior. Not forgetting about the fact that it's by the president of the United States, but by anyone. In fact, if you were in elementary school, you'd get a timeout. If you were in, let's say, middle school, right, you probably would get punched in the face, right? And, and it only gets worse as you get older. I mean, it's so beneath the man. I can't believe it. When I saw it, I was shocked.
Yeah, and it was so shocking that the first time I reported on it, there was a disconnect between what he said and what he said.
The first time I heard it, Ben, I actually thought maybe her name was Peggy.
Peggy.
So I swear, at first I did. And then when I turned around, I was like, oh, no, he didn't. And then my wife was like, oh, yes, he did. And I was like, I stop. There's no way. And then we went ahead, we rewound it. And lo and behold, as you just showed for us, he most, as the Three Stooges would say, oh, he most certainly did. Oh, he most certainly did. Right. And that really deserved like a backhand.
So bizarre. So, then let's go through what else happened in that press conference, because there were so many moments. So Caroline Leavitt was then saying, there's some good news that came out of this government shutdown. And she goes, after 43 days, one of the things that we've determined is this. Let's play the clip.
The Democrats' reckless 43-day government shutdown did manage to do one valuable thing. It proved that America does not need a federal Department of Education. During the longest shutdown in history, the Department of Education furloughed 90% of its staff, and America's education system was not impacted whatsoever. Schools stayed fully open across the country. Students attended class and received normal in-person instruction, and our wonderful teachers received their paychecks uninterrupted. The Democrats' government shutdown made it painfully obvious that American families do not need the Department of Education.
Oh, time. I have a point. Point of order, Mr. Ben.
What's the point of order?
Point of order is, well, I understand that teachers were still teaching, classes were still going on. Well, government was actually still functioning, despite the fact that that all of Congress was basically home on a 8-week furlough. Does that mean we get rid of Congress too?
Well, and it also, there's a few aspects of it. Number one, that. Number two, the cruelty that what you took out of the government shutdown is to get rid of the Department of Education. But three, the stupidity. The Department of Education does not deal with the way schools operate on a day-to-day basis within states. Schools and the education system are local and state functions. Where the federal government comes in, where the Department of Education comes in, is to fill the gaps in areas that the states can't do. Oftentimes dealing with students who are disabled students and helping them, addressing discrimination in schools, addressing funding initiatives that focus on federal priorities, science and tech and things, engineering and things like that. The federal government provides student aid, student loans, and tries to bolster the state systems. But it also just reflects, when she makes a statement like that, well, it was operating. We realize, well, the thing is, the parts that the federal government help out in, lunches, right? Free lunches, and trying to help starving and food desert communities. That's where the federal government helps. And, I guess the fourth point that I'll make just about that clip, and I spoke to Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers. I said, doesn't it seem like every week this regime comes out with another announcement about disbanding the Department of Education. Like, it just feels like at least
Well, they
every
made it crystal clear
weeks,
that they were going to do that a long time ago.
every week
In
they
fact,
do it, and it's just like a sick, cruel
yeah.
torture. And then fifth point, Cohen, then I'll throw it back. Let's keep going. Though 6 point, 7 point, 223 trillion points. But doesn't it feel like the Trump regime enjoys attacking kids? Kids, disabled people, marginalized groups, and especially kids, right? When they got rid of Medicaid programs, it's really impacting kids,
Snaps.
starving kids, education. There is a hatred towards kids. And you know what? When you put kids in an education system and kids get smart and they have to coexist with other kids and you have to be diverse and inclusive and gain knowledge, that's a threat to authoritarian regime. Sorry, Cohen.
Yeah, don't be sorry. Look, the whole claim by Caroline Leavitt, we really can't hold her solely accountable for the stupidity that emanates from that gaping anus under her nose. It's not her fault. If you notice, and Ben or Jeremy, if you could find any clip of Caroline Leavitt grabbing a whole stack of papers, basically reading from it, this is all prepared horse shit from Russell Vought, from Stephen Pee Wee German Miller, right? That's what this is. And all she's doing is reading off of a script. Why she's doing it? Well, she's in the fucking cult. Let's be honest. And she's not going to do anything to jeopardize her position there in the cult, no matter how stupid and ridiculous and insane it is. But that's all that she's doing. It's not like she's answering for Donald Trump. Nobody does that. And yes, she is an adult. I get that too. But every single press secretary answers questions on behalf of the administration, on behalf of the president, that is in line with the administration and the president's, ideas. And she's not answering them personally. She's basically reading off of a script. In fact, her job is not even necessary. Very soon, AI will actually have all of these prepared scripted answers. So you could have an AI robot ask a question to receive back an AI response, because that's really what we're having here. And while I blame her for being an asshole and for perpetuating these lies, the ones who I actually find the most despicable is actually the press idiots that go there to the press room, to the briefing room, expecting that they're going to get an honest answer to anything. What they should do is turn around and say, you know what, question here, Carolyn. Yes, Michael. Every day we come here, every day we ask you questions, every day you lie to us. Why should we even continue to come here? I would love to see somebody throw that there. I know that you're wearing a cross around your neck, but the shit that you spew is so antithetical to what Jesus would do. Maybe you should put something else around your neck, like maybe an albatross, something like that. Why is there nobody there to basically make her look as stupid as she is? And that way, maybe she does quit. Maybe she does, find some God in her life, where the attack on a female, the attack on children, the attack on the disabled, the attack on the poor, the attack on the elderly is no longer acceptable to this, cross-wearing bullshit artist.
See, I think my pushback in our debate, I think you have it a little inverted, in the sense that, to me, the problem with the press and the corporate news establishment in general is that they're so hungry for access and money that they have given away all values and principles for which we used to hold the press at a high standard. And that's why you have the Midas Touch Network and other independent media emerging. So for me, The reason why the press doesn't do that is they're just looking for access. They got to do what they perceive as good for clicks, and they're corporate overlords who are now often billionaires with other business interests using the media as their plaything in order to gain access to their other revenue streams. And the media people you see in the room, they're just kind of stooges and they're pawns in this game. See, Caroline Levitt, though, that job that she's doing, I put more of the onus on her because she sought it. She knows what she's doing. And while those ideas may not originate with her, she's not the originator, but by being the propagator of it, it's more than simply repeating it like a robot or an AI.
But isn't that really what she's doing, Ben? Can't you make the analogy that take like somebody who is looking for shelter because it's snowing out, there's a blizzard, and you see a building, you open up the door, you go into it, but there's no roof. That's what I see with Caroline Levitt.
The better example to me is Osama bin Laden comes up with the plan for 9/11, and then there are the hijackers, and I'll bring this to Saudi Arabia because of the crown prince being at the White House. They carry it out. They're clearly the terrorists taking the orders from somebody. But would you go and say, well, they didn't know what they were doing. They were just, you could have replaced them with anybody. Or another example being someone hatches the plan for the murder and then goes and tells the hit person to do the killing. The person who ultimately pulls the trigger, you may be able to find others, but what Caroline Levitt is doing, I think, is pulling the trigger in a way that divides our country. And she does seem to do it with a delight and a glee and a smile.
That smile really gets to me too, brother.
She does, because the things she's saying, it's so evil that the reaction to it would be like if you saw somebody bleeding out on the street and you walked over to them and you just smiled. And it's the same feeling that you get watching her get off and enjoy it as you would when you see somebody laughing at the suffering of others, because what she's doing is enjoying, it seems, the torture and the pain.
But it's a whole group of them, Ben.
Of course.
I mean, okay, so you've heard me even on this show, like last week when I compared what's his name to Smiling Bob, right? The other idiot, Hassett. All right. On top of that, another smiling idiot is when Stephen Miller gets on and he starts talking about they should all be incarcerated. They should all be beaten for absolutely turning it and saying that the president is not allowed to order an illegal strike and hit on someone. I mean, they are all sadists. They are. And they are cruel. Their entire agenda is literally cruel, illegal, unconstitutional. And it's why I turn around and say all the time, help us to continue to grow this community so big that we don't have to worry, because I'm a worrier, right? You know, I remember when I would take an exam, even if I studied my ass off and I knew that I did well on it, but I was always nervous until I got the grade back. No different than I'm nervous now about what's going to transpire in 2026. Because one thing that Trump is extremely good at is making himself into the victim, right? And my fear is that when you have, like, as I wrote in my Substack of today, you have people like Hakeem Jeffries or a Chuck Schumer that are patting themselves on the back for the release of the Epstein files, but you don't hold your own to that same hypocrisy. My fear is that he's going to ride a wave of victimization again, and that we're not going to be successful in the 2026 midterms, right? And that will ultimately be the end of our democratic republic, because he will do what he's doing now, but on steroids, because he knows right now, poll after poll is showing that they are losing in the 2026 midterms. And if that happens, at least we will have our tripartite system of government to keep the executive branch in check. Right now, we don't have that.
No doubt about it right there. Let's then go to the next thing that Donald Trump was doing today, where he was threatening Democratic lawmakers with death. And he was saying that George Washington would hang you. So he invokes Washington, as Washington would hang you. And he's reposting these accounts. Traitors, you're involved in sedition, you're a domestic terrorist. And these Democratic lawmakers, Congress members, and senators put out a statement that just said, to our members of the military, the current status of the law is that you can't follow unlawful orders because you will be held responsible. Cohen, kind of like the discussion that we were having before.
Yep.
It's not just the general or the commander in chief, although with our Supreme Court, they give Trump absolute immunity, but the general or the Secretary of Defense and his lieutenants and colonels. In a war tribunal, the person who gets the order and pulls the trigger would be held the same level of responsibility as the higher ups. Objectively, there have been war crimes committed by the United States on a daily basis for a lot of things, but let's hone in on the war crimes that are taking place with blowing up these fishing boats off the coast of Venezuela. We know that the top JAG lawyer, his legal memo said that these were war crimes and extrajudicial killings, which is consistent with what we know the UK, the United Nations, France, Germany, pretty much every country deems these to be war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So Pam Bondi and the DOJ, essentially, they overrode the legal opinion of the JAG lawyer, which never happens. And they said, this is fine, you can do it. And what the Trump regime officials are saying is, well, we trust Pam Bondi, the people covering up the child pedo sex trafficking ring, that we support them. So that's where we're at, Cohen, right now. And Trump is making those posts saying, kill these Democrats, hang them like George Washington would hang them. And Caroline Leavitt was asked about it at the press conference. You've accused Democrats of inciting violence, but isn't this directly inciting violence? Now, before playing the clip, to your point, Cohen, when the way this question was framed, it adopts a false framework by the Trump regime when they say the Democrats are the ones doing this, when overwhelmingly these threats are coming from Republicans and MAGA and right-wing extremists. Doesn't mean it never happens from the left, just overwhelmingly the data, which the Trump DOJ took down from its websites, suggests that right-wing extremism, politically motivated violence, overwhelmingly the cause of these assassinations and attacks taking place. And even when you look at the ones that relate to Trump, they're people from right-wing families, gun-touting, kind of right-wing Trumper families.
The funny thing, too, when he started talking about George Washington would hang you, the first thing that came through my mind was that obviously we know that Trump doesn't really care about history. I think he was really referring to King George, not to George Washington. George Washington wasn't hanging anybody. Short of that, on that same theme, I don't know, Ben, if you saw this, and Brigaders, if you haven't seen it too, I want you to Google the following. The Coast Guard, as of Monday, is actually declassifying the swastika, the noose, and the Confederate flag as symbols of hatred. Now, Ben, join me here for a second. As the son of a Holocaust survivor, my father, right? My father spent some time there, not just in an internment camp, but for a short time in Auschwitz. I want to be crystal clear about something. There is nobody in the world that will be able to ever convince me that the swastika is not a symbol of hate, that a noose is not a symbol of racism and hatred towards the Black and brown community, all right? Or that the Confederate flag is a symbol of peace. It is not. And yet, this Department of War, which controls the Coast Guard, thinks that this is acceptable under this administration. And this, to me, this blows me away. This really angers me that the American people are sitting there and saying, yeah, you know what? And the KKK's white robes and their pointy little hats are symbols of freedom and goodness.
They're going to now classify it as potentially divisive under a new policy set to take effect December 15th. And as you said, the noose, the Confederate flag, and the swastika, and, you know, which basically means that if people show it or share it, there's no ramifications. And but I guess that, you know, one of the points as well, Cohen, though, is like, I just want you to think about this. 20, 30 million Americans right now are terrified that they're about to lose their health care and that they can die. 42 million Americans were tortured with the idea of losing their SNAP benefits. We're heading into Thanksgiving where it's not a great Thanksgiving for the American people. Unemployment ticked up to 4.4%. And based on what we saw in October, we're going to be at 5.5% in no time. And normally you may see the unemployment go down if inflation goes up or vice versa. But here we're seeing inflation surge right past 3% year over year. And then on many items, it's 10%, 15%, 20% on key items that like the American people need. And you're seeing unemployment tick up. And that's called stagflation when that happens. And Americans can't afford things while Trump's saying everything is great and everybody's rich and it's a miracle. And I did this and you're living in a golden age. And what they're working on, what their priorities are, this is what their think takes, right? Is not how do we deal with this or that or the other thing. It's, you know what a real problem is in this country. This is what the Trump people are saying, the swastika. Why are we saying that this is a bad symbol? And then they're sitting around at a table the way we're having conversations, right? And people are saying, what if we removed it as a symbol of hate and then told the people in the military, go on, use the swastika, use the noose and the Confederate flag. And then somebody else in the room goes, that's exactly what we need to do right now. And someone goes, all right, here's what we're going to do. Let's make it happen. And then they leave the meeting, going back to Caroline Leavitt. They give her the talking points. Great news, everybody. You see my cross? What I'm here to announce today is that we've made the swastika and we've made the noose and we've made the Confederate flag back to being used again in the military.
It has nothing to do with Jews. It has nothing to do with the Black community. I love the Blacks. The Blacks are great. I love the Blacks. And it has nothing to do with the Klan. Nothing at all to do with the Klan.
I'll take questions, or I pretend you're a reporter, Cohen, and ask me a question. I'll take questions.
Hi, Miss Leavitt over here. Yeah. Can you tell me, how is it that the swastika, the noose, and the Confederate flag are not deemed to be symbols of hate?
Okay, well, Donald J. Trump is a really strong and powerful president. And the American people absolutely voted for this. And when we talk about free speech, the American people want this to happen. Gone are the days in the Biden administration when they would be focused on the woke. And now we've ended the woke. We are in an era of prosperity, and everybody is doing incredible right now. Next question. That right there, end scene, is exactly what happens. Let's take our first quick break of the show. There we go. We didn't even know we were going to do a little role playing on this episode. A reminder to everybody, subscribe right now to Michael Cohen's Substack, the Michael Cohen Substack. Subscribe to his YouTube channel at The Michael Cohen Show. Subscribe to a Mea Culpa audio podcast. Subscribe to everything Michael Cohen related. We'll be right back after our first quick break of the show.
You ever notice how credit card debt works a lot like a bad relationship, where you think everything's fine and then suddenly you're getting mystery charges, angry phone calls, and someone named Collections leaving you voicemails like, I don't know, they're your ex? Well, that's because, and let's be honest here, debt from credit cards is not an accident. It's a system built to keep Americans down. The banks profit, the creditors win, and families, they lose. Every call, every fee, every high interest trap, it's just another reminder that the game is rigged. But luckily, this is the part of the movie where the underdog fights back. PDS debt has already helped hundreds of thousands cut debt, end the calls, and put money back where it belongs, in your pocket, not some banker's bonus pool. Whether you're drowning in credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, or you just bought something late at night because the ad said limited edition, PDS Debt has custom options for you. They actually look at your real financial situation, not the imaginary one where you meal prep every Sunday and never impulse buy sneakers. No. And the best part? No minimum credit score required. If your credit score is so low that it's hiding from you, they don't judge. They just help you pay things off and let you keep more of your money. They're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau with thousands of 5-star reviews, 5-star on Trustpilot, because they've helped hundreds of thousands of people break free from this nonsense. And honestly, if I had needed this product, it's what I would use. And you know, I don't say that lightly. So look, it's your money. It's your future. Don't let the system decide for you. You're 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment right now at pdsdebt.com/beat. That's pdsdebt.com/beat. I got to tell you about my neighbor's cat. You know, the one I always talk about, Marlo. I mean, this guy is a total character. Last week, I watched him sniff around my kitchen like an inspector, judging everything. I mean, I swear, if he could talk, he'd be reviewing restaurants on Yelp. And you know what? I realized something. Marlo deserves the best. And that's where Smalls comes in. Even though I don't feed him, I know he'd go crazy for it. Because Smalls is real protein-packed, preservative-free food that cats actually love. I mean, imagine Marlo doing a taste test. 2 bowls side by side. One with mystery kibble, one with Smalls. Guaranteed, he wouldn't even glance at the kibble. Go straight for Smalls, nose twitching, tail flicking, the full Marlowe seal of approval. So know this, that Smalls started in 2017. 2 people cooking in small batches for friends' cats, and now they've served millions of meals. Fresh, healthy recipes that give cats shinier fur, more energy, fewer hairballs, and a litter box that doesn't make you question life choices. And if your cat doesn't love it, Smalls will refund you. No risk, no questions. So here's the deal. For a limited time, because you're a Political Beatdown listener, you're going to get 60% off your first order plus free shipping. So go right now to smalls.com/beat. That's Smalls, SMALLS.com/beat for 60% off plus free shipping. Treat your cat, or just imagine Marlo enjoying every bite. It's worth it. Boom, boom, boom.
Welcome back to Political Beatdown. Michael Cohen.
Yeah, you know, Ben, I'll tell you something. We're getting a lot of comments from our brigaders. Oh my God, I only love to sit through Michael's commercials. Well, I appreciate that. You know, and Marlo, yeah, he is a pain in the ass. Meow.
That's why in the future, I may just try to pitch advertisers as I'm trying to grow and expand this network. And I'm like, okay, here's the concept. It's Michael Cohen, a full hour. He's just going to do ads the whole time. Okay, but like, what's the show about? It's about you. It's about you and your product. He'll do this ad, that, like the old days of infomercials. It'll just be Cohen ad reads. And then, you know, that's Fox has its own funding mechanism. I'll just do Cohen infomercial ads all day. All right, Cohen, let's talk though about the update on Donald Trump's favorite prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, the beauty pageant contestant turned insurance lawyer with no federal prosecutorial experience at all, who Donald Trump handpicked to lead the Eastern District of Virginia prosecution against James Comey after the career prosecutors, including the Republican interim United States attorney, was basically fired by Donald Trump and pushed out. And that former Republican United States interim attorney wrote a memo to file saying that there's no evidence to go after Comey, no evidence to go after New York Attorney General Letitia James. So I just want you to think about this from the perspective of a criminal case, where the standard is reasonable doubt. When you get that document in discovery and one of your exhibits to the jury is, we got a memo. Who's it from? The prosecutor's office. Which one? Them, from their office. And what do they say? That there's no evidence to go after my client? Really? So not only did they say there's no reasonable doubt, they said there's no evidence at all. So the first part of this hearing with Halligan that took place earlier, which was Comey's request for dismissal, one of the things that I thought was the bombshell, right, was that the prosecutors did not turn over that memo. Like, we know that there's a memo that says, don't prosecute Comey by a Republican interim United States attorney who then got fired. There's no evidence. So they didn't turn that over. Why? The DOJ and the deputy AG's office says, don't turn it over. So to me, that was the first moment. But then, Cohen, they go to, did the grand jury ever receive the actual 2-count indictment that became the indictment that they purportedly voted on in order to indict Comey and find probable cause? And during the hearing, Lindsay Halligan and the prosecutors both said, we never showed the actual indictment to the grand jury. We just showed it to the 4-person and one other grand juror. And so people may be saying, the hell? How does that happen? It never happens. Ever. Never has happened.
Let's just say that's a pretty significant procedural error.
Never has happened before. So there's no like, well, when this happened, no, it never happens. Why? Because you have competent people who do this. So what appears to have happened is that Lindsay Halligan first presented a 3-count indictment to the grand jury. And according to Halligan and the DOJ, the grand jury rejected the first count, but accepted the final 2 counts. However, that's not what the document says. The document says that they rejected all 3 counts. According to the Halligan story, because they approved 2 counts, she had to print out another copy to get them to sign off on that. That copy was never presented to the grand jury, but Lindsay Halligan had the 4-person and somebody else and another grand juror who was there sign off as though it was presented to the full grand jury and they hadn't seen it. So I'm going to try to read this, but my eyes, Cohen, are not the greatest right now. This says, after the November 19, 2025 hearing on the defendant's vindictive prosecution memorandum, the Eastern District of Virginia grand jury after they put that, it was so small for me. Coordinator informed the undersigned that the grand jury 4-person informed her that they had returned a true bill as to counts 2 and 3 and not as to count 1. The coordinator was informed by the deputy criminal chief to amend the indictment by removing the text of the former count 1 and moving the remaining counts 2 and 3 to reflect as counts 1 and 2, and that it was the coordinator and the foreperson, who were the people who were in the room, but not the full grand jury. Well, today, now Halligan's team filed a notice of correction.
Right.
And their notice of correction goes and says, well, the foreperson stated in the transcript that the grand jury approved this. And so what they're trying to do, now the foreperson is just like a regular citizen who got a jury notice, right? So the foreperson doesn't know the procedure, right? That the indictment needed to be showed to the entire to the entire grand jury.
Yeah. So
now they're trying to blame the foreperson,
right,
as though the foreperson said it. But yesterday,
is the foreperson supposed to know how the process works, or are they just there on behalf of the grand jurors, the grand jurists? So let me be crystal clear about something. All right, and I've watched now a multitude of former federal prosecutors turn around and say, yeah, I didn't even know that there was a notice of correction that you can file, simply because in the 38 years that I've been practicing law, I've actually never had or never heard of anybody filing such a thing. I don't even know if what they're saying about this notice of correction is even something that exists. I mean, literally, I couldn't find it. I looked for it. I suspect maybe that there is something.
No,
there
I practiced in federal. There's something called a notice of errata, right?
Yes.
And I filed notice of erratas before, and maybe you do a notice of errata where your case citation is like 33 cal.app.333-5, but it's 333-4, right? Errata. Judge, and this is what would cause you panic as a lawyer sometimes, because when you were going through your table of contents, I remember how diligent I would be as a litigator to make sure every point was whatever. And if I made a mistake, I'd like, oh my God, we need a notice of errata. I told the judge that the case starts on page 334-5 and it was 334-6. The idea of a notice of correction, which after you do your hearing, you go and say, oopsies, everything we told you at that hearing on the substantive issue in the hearing as officers of the court, where we said that only the foreperson and one other grand juror saw it, actually, we've now uncovered something that we had in our possession, weeks ago, because it's the grand jury testimony. And actually, we're going to just say the foreperson mentioned that this was approved by the grand jury. So we're going to just put it on the foreperson, and the foreperson didn't know. The foreperson was given something to sign by this interim fake United States attorney and Lindsay Halligan. And so the foreperson is not the legal authority. The legal authority is you idiots. It's the lawyers who are there. And if you wanted to make this argument, when you make them in court. You know what this would be like? And I'm sorry to all of our Toronto fans with the Blue Jays losing the World Series to my LA Dodgers. This is what it would be like after the game is over. Notice of redo, and people like, the game's over.
I want to take that pitch back. All right.
I'd like to take the pitch back. Notice of repitch. And
Ben, what this really reminds me of? Seriously, what this really reminds me of, and I know you're going to finally agree with me on this one. This is like the movie My Cousin Vinny. And I really want to be Fred Gwynn, the judge in this, and go, pretending that Lindsay Halligan is Vinny Gambini, right? Because this is the kind of procedural stupidity that Mr. Gambini, it's like, did you just say ute? Right? What is a ute? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. This is, okay, I'm with you on that. People make citation errors. Maybe you hit, instead of 333, you did 3333, just simply because it happens. So you do the notice of the correction, the errata. I get it. But those aren't significant errors that is the predicate for the entire motion. Yes, what you're doing is you're doing a correction so that the record reflects it correctly, that if there's an appeal or something, that they go to page 333, not 3333, which doesn't exist. I get that. This is the entire procedure that they are
the
now
game.
turning
It's the
around
ball
and
game.
saying. I mean, this is like, yeah, we kind of like did the whole thing wrong. So yeah, but I will tell you that what it does do is it gives them the ability, if granted, to avoid the statute of limitations violation that would exist if they brought the case now.
How so?
Because the motion that they're bringing brings it back to the date of the filing as a correction and not as a new issue.
I'm not sure I agree with that. You're saying
It does.
which thing though you're talking about? Like Pam Bondi has tried to retroactively. They couldn't go back to the grand jury now.
No, what she's saying is that they don't have to, that they're just correcting the record onto it, even though the record is completely screwed up because procedurally it was done wrong. But what they're saying is if we brought back the grand jury and we showed them the documents and so on, and that they agreed to the indictment, well, then lo and behold, it's correcting the record, not
I don't think you can. I don't think you can bring
no,
back.
I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm saying that this is the argument.
I don't. I mean, they could argue that they'll build a time capsule and go back and maybe tell Lindsay Halligan that she should. I mean, there's so many things that they could do, but like, you can't bring this. You can't re-impanel this same grand jury tomorrow. It's done. They're done. They've been released of their obligation. The proceeding is over. Where I'm confident, though, is that this judge, I think, is going to find a few things. I mean, there's also the issue, though, and this is different and distinct from what the magistrate judge talked about, because the grand jury also got false instructions. So they were told to basically ignore James Comey's Fifth Amendment rights. That's what they were instructed by Lindsay Halligan, according to what the magistrate judge implied in the ruling. And also, Lindsay Halligan seemed to suggest to the grand jury that she didn't have to present the evidence that they had against him there, but that they had stronger evidence that strategically they were going to show at trial, and that the burden would then be on Comey to take the stand and rebut it at trial, or some warped view of the law. So there's the issue also of Halligan giving the jury incorrect legal instructions. Then there was the issue about the grand jury not getting this indictment. And then there was the issue with the only witness who testified was an FBI agent who was exposed to attorney-client information of James Comey, which disqualified him from testifying. And what it seems but he still testified nonetheless, despite being exposed to attorney-client privilege. And you would say, well, why'd they have this FBI officer? Any FBI officer could show up and basically testify on hearsay based on their review of the file, because only the guy who was exposed to the attorney-client privilege stuff was the only person who was agreeing to testify, which probably gives you insight into, that individual's warped mindset as well. So I think where this order is going to go, I think it's going to hit on all of those factors. I think it's going to find vindictive prosecution. I think it's going to find that the grand jury never got the underlying indictment. I think it's going to find that the FBI agent who testified was not qualified to testify based on exposure to attorney-client privilege. I think they're going to find that the grand jury was given false legal instructions. And I think you're going to find a referral from all of the judges involved in the case. I think they'll be shoulder to shoulder that Lindsay Halligan should be looked into based on what she did. For a very basic proceeding in theory, this grand jury proceeding the amount of errors that were made are probably worse than if you just picked any random first-year law student and then had them read a book and then do it in 48 hours. I mean, it couldn't have been handled worse.
It's called disclosure, you fucking idiot.
You know, one other point I want to bring up, and then I want to give you a layup for the two-finger salute. So earlier today as well, a Democratic senator, Senator Heinrich from New Mexico, put forward what's called a unanimous consent motion to repeal the provision in that continuing resolution that ended the government shutdown, which allowed the individual senators to pursue $500,000 payouts, at least potentially more, from the taxpayers because their phone number showed up in subpoenas or in documents from subpoenas that were issued by federal courts because of their communications relating to the January 6th insurrection, their communications with Trump and others. Senator Lindsey Graham stands up and objects to kill the bill, so it fails. So everybody remembers how with the release of the Epstein files, nobody objected when Schumer motioned unanimous consent. Here, Lindsey Graham objected, and that means they've killed us. And again, I go back to what I say before, which is Americans are struggling right now heading into Thanksgiving. That's a given, objectively. And when they see Trump partying with the Saudi crown prince at all of these events, and when we see Lindsey Graham do things like this, and the Republicans in the Senate, and when we see the half-naked women in the martini glasses at Trump's properties, and when we see Caroline Leavitt enjoying the suffering of others, you know, Trump has even lost, Cohen, white voters in the latest Morris poll. I mean, you know, it took you some time, but in the latest Morris poll, 50 to 46 white voters disapprove of Trump. Although, you know, should not exactly deserve a lot of credit for realizing that right now. Let's just say that. But Cohen, to me, you can't tell any of these stories in slices. And I think sometimes the problem with creators, influencers, and the media is they tell stories in slices, but they don't show the apple pie. Because you need to make all of these connections. The covering up of the Epstein files is related to this culture of rich, male, often right-wing oligarchs, but oligarchs in general, screwing over people. It is a culture of grift and lack of accountability, and a predatory culture that preys on people in all sorts of ways, whether it's with their trafficking rings, whether it's economic predation, whether it is immigration predation, you name it. This is a rogue, lawless, criminal, despicable regime. And I'll give you the two-finger salute.
Yeah. So I don't think you're going to be able to guess who I want to give the two-finger salute to, because to me, it's very personal. To those of you that read my Substack, you would know who it is. I'm giving mine to Representative Stacey Plaskett of the Virgin Islands. And not because she was questioning me at my live House Oversight hearing. Not because testifying before Congress is emotionally fucking debilitating. It was one of 7 that I did. This one, of course, being live. It's the fact that she was in communication with the most despicable human being on the planet at the time, Jeffrey Epstein. And it's not the questions that she was asking. Lord knows she could have, and she should have, as a lawyer, as a former prosecutor, she could have come up with her own questions. Her staff could have come up with their own questions for me. But instead, she's texting with Jeffrey Epstein while I'm going through this scenario. And it's not just Stacey Plaskett that I have a problem with. She owes the American people. She owes the victim. She owes me an explanation as to her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It's not as if everybody has her private cell number. It's not that she would be picking up people's information that they think that she should be asking me during a live hearing. It's not that. It's you now have, again, Hakeem Jeffries coming out there, and instead of as the leader or the wannabe future leader of the House, the Speaker of the House, if God willing, we take it back in 2026 with a censure. No. It has nothing to do with Stacey Plaskett. It's all the Republicans because we beat them with the bill and they have to now return it. It's the hypocrisy. If we're going to call out, as we do here all the time on Political Beatdown, as Ben and I do on our various other shows as well, if we're going to talk about the hypocrisy of the Republican Party and ignore the shit that goes on within our own house, well, that's exactly what Trump rode the 2025 election in where he is constantly the victim. And I am sick and tired of the fact that like Hakeem Jeffries wants to play nice to everybody because he wants to be desperately the Speaker of the House. And I am insulted personally that she did it. She does, right, Araya? She needs to explain herself. And he cannot just whitewash it and say that this is a Republican hoax. That's Trump shit, and that's what we fight every single day. It's why we talk about the Caroline Levitts. So to Stacey Plaskett, right, fuck you. To Hakeem Jeffries for doing what he did, fuck you too.
Definitely a wild card choice for the two finger salute, given all that's going on. And, so you're right in the sense that I wouldn't predict that. But let me give another perspective, which is the following. What she did can be viewed as heinous, reprehensible, worthy of censure. The question ultimately is, though, she is a non-voting at-large delegate. She doesn't get a vote in the House of Representatives, so she's able to participate in debates. That's why she was able to question you. So my only point, Cohen, is given all of the myriad of issues out there and the limited time to address all of those issues, my only question is the power of our lens as reporters with all that's going on. The question becomes, and I pose it as a question, which is, am I more offended such that the devotion of finite time is focused on a non-voting congressional at-large delegate from the Virgin Islands? Now, as your friend, I take it personally in the sense that it was something that was done to you. And so I come at it with a perspective that Epstein was helping coordinate questions to a friend of mine, to a close friend of mine. And that's not cool. My broader question to ask, though, is where you have Trump destroying our democracy, where you have war crimes taking place, where you had the Republicans covering up the child sex trafficking ring, where you have them engaged in crimes against humanity on a daily basis, where you have people like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche moving Ghislaine Maxwell to minimum security facilities and helping her get VIP treatment. In that world, the question becomes for us, and this is a journalistic thing, can we appropriately call out this behavior like we should? Bad behavior. But the question of weight, the weight of the lens that we use is something to, I think, assess And that would be my point. Not what she did is fine or acceptable or good. It's worthy of condemnation. The question is, on a scale of condemnation, where we get one two-finger salute, but more broadly framed, dealing with a fascist attack.
I get your point, but my pushback on that is we want to be above what they're doing there in DC on both sides of the aisle. The hypocrisy is the part that I find to be so reprehensible. It would not be wrong for the leader, or the minority leader in this case, right, to turn around and instead of looking into the camera and saying that, there's nothing here. It's the reason why more than 70% of America, Republicans, Democrats, and independents combined, think that Washington and our politicians are full of shit. All right. And that's unhealthy for the future of a democratic republic. How many people even here think that their politicians are full of shit, which they are? So there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying, and I never called for her to be thrown out. I never turned around and said that she should be censured. I say that she has some explaining to do. All right. How do we know that she didn't know what the fuck was going on Little St. James Island? I mean, it's a tiny little island. Are you really going to tell me airplanes coming in, private airplanes like Epstein's and others, and you have a bunch of little girls running around there, and you have all of these high-powered men, coming to the island from celebrities to politicians to businessmen? You really think that type of a secret for so long stays hidden? I think she has an obligation, just as every single person who will be named in those files that will, God, hopefully one day be released. They have an obligation to provide answers.
Right, which is why, and this is, I think, I want to show people the type of respectful debate that we just had there is what I wish we could have all the time. There wasn't yelling, there wasn't shouting. I think we each made, certain points. You can, as an audience, assess it yourself, but that's simply where, and I know the two-finger salute that we do at the end of the show doesn't take on some official whatever, I mean, I get it.
It's not dick.
It's dick, but my point is that if the two-finger salute is given to the person who exemplifies the worst behavior of the week, that's all, then my thought would be the people who continue to cover up, who have access to these files and continue to cover it up, deserve it. So I would give it to, even though you could probably give it to her every day, to a Pam Bondi and a Todd Blanche and a Kash Patel and that crew. That said, everybody's
the president every single day.
Well, you give it to that's why Trump gets it every day.
Administration every day.
You remove him from it, and you could give it to Christine Ohm pretty much every day. You can give it to pretty much everyone. All of the cabinet members you can cycle through. And so there's a little bit of creativity. Anyway, we get it. Everybody hit subscribe. Subscribe to Michael Cohen's YouTube channel at The Michael Cohen Show. Subscribe to the Mea Culpa audio podcast. Make sure to watch the show I do live with my brothers at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific tonight on the Midas Touch YouTube
channel.
Can
I just say one thing about the Mea Culpa podcast, Blue? Please. At midnight tonight, I have Noelle Dunphy, who is the young lady that has a lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani for sexual misconduct with her. There are a ton of bombshells. When I say bombshells, this is the Moab, the mother of all bombs, dropping tonight on Mea Culpa Blue with Noelle Dunphy. So I strongly suggest, you want to learn a lot about Rudy Colludi, drunken Giuliani, and his mushroom pud? Well, there you go.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. And thanks everybody for watching.
Boom.